Hey, illiterate listeners and Podbean listeners out there, we've got stickers, and I use them as bookmarks. Stickers, illiterate stickers. They're poppy, they're cool, they're yellow, they're red.
And you can get them for free.
Free! All you have to do is reach out to us at illiteratepod. Taylor, what's our email? If they want to email.
illiterate@email.com.
Just reach out to us. Tell us what you're reading. Tell us what you're watching. Tell us a funny joke. Curse at us. Tell us what you hate about the show. Tell us what you love about the show. We will send you back a sticker, and it's free. I use them as bookmarks when I'm reading my books. I read books. I know. It's incredible.
If you want free stuff, all you have to do is reach out to us at illiteratepod on Instagram, illiterate@email.com.
Get that free stuff and enjoy the show.
Here we go.
Welcome, everybody. This is Illiterate. My name is Evan.
My name is Taylor. I read a speech this week.
I watched a movie. This week we're doing Selma. Martin Luther King Jr. It was his birthday this week, and I have never seen the film. This is the only theatrical feature film about the man ever done, and it's pretty staggering.
So today we're going to talk about the movie and Martin Luther King Jr. as an author. He's most known for his oratory and speeches, as well as obviously
intellectual property of the estate. Just so you all know,
yeah.
Copy wrote
and
written.
And we'll cover that and what his legacy means now and for the future and for entertainment at large and our perception of him. Firstly, though, the movie, like you said, came out in 2014. Ava DuVernay is the director and rewriter.
Immediately, it actually caught the attention of the lead actor that ended up playing MLK in this version, David Oyelowo. Eventually, Lee Daniels came on board to direct it. They brought somebody else on. And from what I understand, that kind of devolved. He went away from the picture and he went on to do The Butler.
Yeah. This gal, Ava, says she rewrote 90% of the script. Of course, at this time, in 2009, as Evan mentioned, copywritten, the King's estate has all of his word-for-word stuff on lock. They, in a rare situation, which I couldn't find any reason why, licensed them to Warner Brothers.
Oh, really?
In relation to Steven Spielberg. So that's what happened in 2009.
Oh.
So that's why they couldn't use, and he has the life rights and all that stuff. So she had to rewrite all of the speeches and all of the things that are known historically for him to have said. It's
pretty staggering. I'm more and more shocked by the end. By the end of it, I'm just like, no way. Where did she get this? Well, how did this happen? How can she possibly get this clip? I mean, it's incredible.
Well, a lot of times she just replaced a word with another word, like ballot instead of vote for key phrases and things like that. But she did mimic his cadence of repeating things in threes and repeating the beginning of a phrase. I have a dream.
Yeah, see, I wanted to know. Yeah.
That kind of stuff she did work on.
They did a magic trick in front of a camera. They did a magic trick. It is so successful in making you believe that it is the gospel.
Yeah. Well, and even in David's voice, I was looking into it, and he said he kept the voice. They had worked to try and, not for him to imitate, but to just become that cadence and style of speaking. And so she said that he kept it, and it wasn't method, like he wasn't Martin Luther King Jr. at craft services getting lunch, but he kept the style of speaking and voice through the 3 months that he was in the production. So he was just speaking that way all day at home with his family, all throughout the set, not in character, but just
just in that voice. Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, that would have been annoying.
The funny thing.
Go to bed, David. I will not.
The last little thing about Spielberg and his interest in it, apparently at some AFI event, which is the American Film Institute event, after Selma had come out, Spielberg went up to David Oyelowo and asked him, hey, I really love this. Would you be interested in reprising the role?
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
No way.
And
that will be crazy.
If that happens.
If he does reprise the role as
in like
MLK,
5 years.
What in the world? That will be incredible. But
also scandal.
I mean, I think it would almost be an embrace of Selma in a way, of being like, that was that, because then how do they handle that 3 months within, if he's doing if they're doing a cradle to grave biopic on him? How, are you going to skip over Selma and like, or you know, go to the edges and be like, well, there is a movie about this particular time, if you don't cover that and just be like, yeah, that was it. maybe that's a crazy embrace, but you say a scandal, how?
Well, just because they already made it and it didn't get the recognition that most people thought it would.
Right. And I totally agree. But to that point, if the filmmakers then, if Spielberg goes on and says, actually, yeah, that is valid, I'm not even going to touch those couple of months. I'm going to use the same actor and say that, look, now there are 2 movies and it's continuity. Now it's a shared universe. There's a Martin Luther King cinematic universe.
Yeah. We can only
can we get Abe Lincoln in this piece? How can we connect them? This will be crazy.
The reason that this is
grassy knoll.
Evan just wants every historical thing.
Oh my God.
The reason this has been so complicated and why there's a movie about Martin Luther King Jr., the only one that we know that came out in 2014. Why in the world has this taken so long?
Why?
A big part of it is, like we said, the rights and the copyright. And unfortunately, there's a ton of drama with the estate and his family. So, for example, his son, Martin III, and Dexter sued their sister Bernice. Like there's infighting within the family because she rejected on the bid to auction King's Nobel Peace Prize and Travel Bible. There was also, when the National Museum of African American History opened up very recently in Washington, D.C., which is a part of the Smithsonian Institute, there was nothing of Martin Luther King Jr.'s there because they wouldn't give anything to the Smithsonian.
Oh my God.
And so it's like they are so, which is why it's so bizarre to me that they, in 2009, they were like, sure, have all of his speeches.
Yeah, Steven Spielberg. How? I had no idea.
So that's why.
Is bizarre.
Yeah, so that's why there's not a lot of stuff that is fiction. I mean, there's a lot of documentaries and things on him, but there aren't a lot of recreations.
A notable one that our audiences can see for free that I happened to find on YouTube. It's up. I think it was put up for free by the production company. It's called King in the Wilderness. It was an HBO documentary that came out in 2018 by the Kundhart Film Foundation. They put it up on their YouTube page, so it's totally legal and totally free for anybody to go see. It's about 2 hours. I skimmed through parts of it, but it looked really great. It has some brand new interviews with all of the people who are still around. It looked great.
Yeah. The other big documentary that most people would be interested in is called Eyes on the Prize, which came out via PBS in 1987, and actually episode 6. Because it covers the whole civil rights movement up to modern times. And it was, episode 6 was the Selma one. It was nominated at the 1988 Oscars for Best Documentary Feature, because the episodes are pretty lengthy, so it wasn't even in the TV category. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's amazing.
And again, and it's so fascinating, there are copyright issues with this in regards to the original source material of the documentary film, and not even related to the King estate. But for a time, it was just completely missing from 1993 to 2006, and people thought they would never be able to air it or reproduce it because they couldn't get the rights figured out for the documentary material that they had cobbled together for this. So there was a whole project called Eyes on the Screen, since this thing is called Eyes on the Prize, where people were distributing it via torrents and file sharing sites to try and keep it alive before they shut it down. Eventually, all the copyright stuff got worked out, and now it's on DVD.
Okay.
You know, PBS
when did that happen?
Re-released it. But that whole recently, from 93 to 2006.
Gotcha.
There was concern that all of this was going to be for naught, this wonderful, wonderful 14-part documentary series.
Oh my God. That was a roller coaster. It's like, what's gonna?
But it's out now. I'll post a link. I'll post links to everything that we're talking about here. One thing with the Selma production that was a controversy, well, I guess a couple things, but one of the ones in relation to other media that exists was her portrayal of Lyndon B. Johnson in the film.
I don't know what you're about to say.
Okay.
I really liked it. I really enjoyed her particular portrayal of him. I thought the actor was incredible. I thought you see a lot of LBJs out there these days, and a lot of them are kind of phoning it in, both on looks and tone. I really enjoyed it. I want to see more of him as LBJ. But go on.
In the movie, the controversy that some people had,
hint Spielberg,
was that he was too aggressively against Martin Luther King. Like he was propped up as an obstructionist towards Martin Luther King to create villainy and conflict in the film, to give him an opposition. And there are people that work directly with Lyndon B. Johnson, various people around him, that after the movie came out, they were like, hey, that's not actually how it was. And then there are other people that are like, hey, this is fictional. She's presenting a view on it, and also,
right?
This is not a documentary.
She's not a historian. She's not a documentarian. She's not a librarian. She's not the custodian of anybody's legacy.
Right. And she was open about that. Also, she was trying to make a point that there are tons of movies about white people coming in and saving the day, and it's like, this isn't about LBJ
right
coming in and signing the bill that changes everything.
From my totally illiterate perspective here on the events of it, they presented him playing the very safe middle, hands out of it.
Right.
You guys let it go. So he has to be in there. It has to be some escalation of drama there. That has got to be the backbone of what is accomplished over the events of the film, which only covers a 3-month period.
Yeah.
This is about what happened at Selma. This is about remembering why Selma is so important, a linchpin in actually getting the 1965 Civil Rights Act signed. That's what this movie is about, not LBJ. In fact, he had a movie come out a couple years ago. Okay, this isn't about LBJ.
Right. So yeah, I mean, a
lot of LBJ out there. Sorry, I just got to say it again.
Some MLK in here.
There's a lot of LBJ out there, and not enough MLK.
The other thing that was controversial in this film was how LBJ put Hoover and the FBI on watching him and keeping tabs on him and all that stuff.
Right. There's a running thematic through it about like actually setting up a scene. It'll be like the insignia of a FBI document about the surveillance. Do you have any light to shed on that?
Yeah, Hoover had been on MLK way before this. So Bobby Kennedy was actually responsible for keeping tabs on him because they were worried, because Martin Luther King Jr. was admittedly more of a democratic socialist. Socialism was lumped in with communism, and of course this is the time where in the 60s people are very concerned about this. So he was lumped in with that COINTELPRO program that we had talked about that was watching Charles Manson and whatnot,
chaos,
and sowing seeds of chaos in different communities and leaders and whatnot. So the FBI was all about that. This goes into the other controversy, I guess, we can get into in relation to this movie and his life, which is the questions of infidelity with Martin Luther King Jr. So yeah, like I said, Robert Kennedy. I was
shocked. It's a big linchpin in the film. They present in the film that he comes under question by his wife of infidelity in this 3-month period, and he actually misses Bloody Sunday, one of the first violent attempt across the bridge.
Yeah,
that he misses that march because he is back home. I must be with my family is a kind of memorable quote they give him on the phone, explaining to his other leaders why he can't be there. So I've never really known where to put any of this in my mind. And so I choose not to, honestly. And so it was so shocking to me that Selma presents it and says, no, he was dealing with this at the time. So please shed some light on this for me.
The CIA and FBI, they had been wiretapping him in '63 after the March on DC, where they're like, we got to watch this guy. There's a famous civil rights leader that was alongside him who came out in his autobiography in 1989, Ralph Abernathy. And this was where the first instance of this going out to the public of like, oh yeah, he was womanizing or he had extramarital affairs.
Not until 1989.
Right.
See, this is what I was saying earlier of like, it seems like it came out so much later. And at that point, I don't know, you know?
Yeah. This guy's autobiography said things about it and people, believed it. And then this guy backpedaled and was like, you're misconstruing my words and making more of a big deal about it than I set it out to be. What we do know, though, was that the CIA and FBI were watching him and recording what he was saying and recording all his phone calls and all that stuff. So after he wins the Nobel Peace Prize, there was an anonymous note with tapes sent to his wife and then sent to him. And it's unofficially dubbed the suicide note because it was a threat and saying, you're done, you know what to do, basically. And that's what he interpreted it as like, here's the damning evidence. Quit the movement, stop what you're doing, return the Nobel Peace Prize, or kill yourself, because there's going to be a lot. And I'll post a link. You can. There's parts of it that have been declassified or figured out somehow that you can read. But it's written not to be perceived as the FBI, but obviously that's who it would be, because who would have these tapes of him? Right. Coretta Scott King is quoted as saying, yeah, she doesn't know what was on it. It sounds like a jumble. But obviously it didn't do anything because he didn't stop, and then they didn't press further on these affairs. So some people think it was like they were trying to think that they got him on something, and then they didn't actually get him on anything, and so that's why he didn't stop, or he just genuinely wasn't scared of that, or it did happen, but they weren't going to push it any further, kind of thing, because then they're corrupt. Then they're known as doing illegal activities. If then it's like, well, how so all of that gets lost to history in terms of him not being at the Selma first march. And I don't have the exact citation of this, so this could also be speculation, but apparently by a coin flip, it was determined as a part of the SCLC, which was the civil rights organization that he was the president of, that Hosea Williams would represent them at the head of the march, along with John Lewis at the time, and then Martin Luther King would meet them halfway afterwards. He was still going to be with his congregation in Atlanta. And then, of course, Bloody Sunday happens, and then he's like, oh, I'm going to come.
I have to go
for the Tuesday thing. So,
and I didn't know there were several attempts. I always knew they marched from Selma to Montgomery. I didn't know, well, in a 3-month span, there was a terrorist bombing where some children were killed. And there were 3 attempts to cross this bridge. I did not. I mean, and even Bloody Sunday I knew about, but I didn't remember that it was several attempts. That Bloody Sunday didn't just happen along the way or somewhere. To that amalgamation of event. It's so public school is so bad.
They just tell you that he said, "I have a dream," and that's it.
Yeah, so he was appointed the leader of civil rights, and he won. And so moving on to Vietnam. It's like, oh, preordained. Okay, cool. No. Well,
let me just give you kind of a refresher on some of that stuff, because I'm not as familiar with all of the intricacies of his life in this span of time preceding this, but I think showing how much he advocated nonviolence is huge. Yeah. And also how much violence was instituted against him and millions of people in the South and in the North of the United States, and how he just continued to hold ground and do the same thing. And leading up to this, why then this became the catalyst for what everybody saw as his legacy.
It's also, we might be remiss to not mention that Malcolm X is involved.
And
he gets killed in this span of time.
Yeah, I'll get into how he fits into
fantastic.
that.
That was something that was like a crazy element of this that I never imagined. But then it starts to come full circle of actually the trajectory of Malcolm X and MLK, what they thought of each other at the time, which is always something I've wondered about. And this puts that right up front and center for a few minutes. Yeah.
I might miss, just so everybody's aware, some moments in this because it's all of American history in the 60s.
Sorry, we weren't there to experience their lives.
But the big moments that I think from my research that contributed to his life leading up to Selma would be, starting out, the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, was the first big thing that he was spearheading and in charge of and pushing people to do. I mean, it was just crazy. Like people walking 14 miles, but like reporters would come in and be like, oh yeah, African Americans here, they are, standing together for 381 days. And businesses are not allowing them to do so. It escalated into this whole huge, crazy experience.
It's kind of like looking at holding a magnet up to another magnet, and you can't see the repulsion, like the force going on between the two, but you can feel it even though it's totally invisible. Imagine, insane. It's incredible.
But again, amazing that like people are not throwing bottles through windows and punching people, and
they're just making a physical example of unmoving solidarity.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And
ghostly in a way.
For over a year.
For 381 days. Like, you'd feel like walking around, and surely at the time it'd feel like walking around in an episode of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I mean, they had to.
It's a Twilight Zone plot.
At this point in 1959 is when he visits India, because he's obviously very inspired by Gandhi, but he actually went over there and spoke with some people and saw all of that, and that bolstered his understanding and appreciation for exactly what he was about.
I mean, and think about a man that stood for so much and had so much. I mean, he's questioning morality at every step of the way, decisions in his life. but to be so willing to reach out and expand your empathy like that, and really do the work and research on what this all means and what it's all for, and be willing to
see other cultures, and
take that and help purport all of that in the world.
Yeah,
that's not. Most people like to just be right and pretend that they've always known they were right, and then they've always been right and forever will be.
Yeah,
But,
he had a
he had a
global cause.
Yeah,
that he was aware of. This is like a human effort.
Honestly, a big takeaway of the film is like, well, he was not just the leader of the civil rights movement in America. He was really raging a war against an oppressive machine that took power from anywhere it could take it, from anyone.
Yeah.
Those without power will continue to lose power. And he was just waging a war against that machinery in any way that he can. And being a black man in the South, a black preacher in the South, that was how he waged his war. And I mean, it's pretty incredible being able to see your purview and what you can actually have a direct effect on, and know how to implement the goals that you want.
Yeah.
Actually having the big picture result in mind.
Yeah. And so with that, the next thing he says, they try to do a march in Albany, Georgia. Does not go well. He's jailed again. I think it was 29 times over the course of his life that he got jailed for doing nothing.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to go to the MLK Museum. I think there's a museum in Atlanta, and they have a lot of his actual letters and writings and materials that he had with him in jail cells throughout the whole period. It was really fascinating to have those. Like, it was amazing to just be in the presence of, like, that's his written word right there. That's the pen stroke. So anybody in Atlanta, it was a fantastic exhibit, but I went quite a long time ago. I don't know how it's changed since.
Yeah. Continuing on with his marches and efforts, he's finding another place, because obviously Albany, Georgia is not the place for where this needs to go. So Birmingham is the next spot where he's instituting marches and being involved. Gets jailed again. One of his famous letters is from a Birmingham jail. Part of his genius and understanding is like, we don't just keep hammering home the one phrase idea. It's like, this isn't working. We've got to try something else. It's not working here. We're going to try it over there. People aren't responding to this. We're going to do this. The media is not picking up things here.
It's what we are doing now is not the only way. How do we recontextualize our message in a different? How do we attack in a different way? A different type of thought war. Really,
and so
the thing how do we frame the argument? How many different ways into this argument are there, and how do we actually state that physically in the public, nonviolently?
Yeah. So with Birmingham, then there was something called the Children's March, where kids between 9 and 18 it went, and they sent dogs and fire hoses, and it was insane.
God.
And so people are like, oh, this is horrible.
I didn't know that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's
but again, he's like, nobody's paying attention. Some people might see it as exploitative, but it's like the kids are just as poorly treated as the adults.
Right.
In this place.
Don't pretend like they live in a different reality.
Yeah.
They're right there.
And if here's thousands of them who are...
I hear a children's part, it makes sense on one degree, but then immediately the implications of that, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. And it still didn't garner any attention. Yeah. It didn't get the right reaction.
So...
How many people have to die?
After this time...
That's the honest to God question here.
Yeah. That's what's so crazy about this. We're still not even close to Selma.
Yeah, we're not even anywhere close.
At this time in Birmingham.
What year are we?
What year? Yeah. 63.
Oh my God.
Yeah. His motel and his brother's home was bombed at this time. So he's feeling the mounting pressure of like, it's a ticking time bomb for him personally, because he is the face of this for most people. This is then in August of 63 when he says, well, we're going to get national attention. So this is when the March on D.C. happens. And again, you can see how I'm saying this is calculated and thought out and working to make a point by branching off of different things.
And then it's not purely reactionary. They're attacking in different ways, but they're really thinking about what is the best next option. What is the next great idea here? What's another way to phrase this argument?
Yeah. This is then obviously in support of the Civil Rights Bill. This is the I Have a Dream speech, which was, I mean, that was the thing. That's like regarded as one of the best speeches in recorded history of all time. I looked this up just because I'm always
written by Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. I just want to see the fallout of these things and what happens after, because this speech is one of the most famous things of all time.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't until the 80s when the head basketball coach of the University of Iowa was doing an interview, because he was the first African-American coach at that university. And they asked if in this time, because he was growing up in this time, if he was involved in the civil rights movement at any point. And he was like, oh, yeah, I have the speech. And they're like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, Martin Luther King gave it to me. So this guy's name is this guy's name is George Raveling. He also coached at Washington State and USC. He was 26 years old at the time.
My
he was
hands just in my head is in my hands right now.
Yeah.
just head down. What?
This guy was, like I said, he was 26 years old. He was visiting a friend in Wilmington, North Carolina. On a lark, they were like, "Oh, this thing's happening in DC. Should we go?" And the dad's like, "Yeah, go check it out." So they go up there.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. Somebody immediately comes up to him and is like, "Hey, are you here to volunteer?" And they were like, "Yeah, I guess so." So then he's like 9 people away from Martin Luther King Jr. on the podium when he's giving the speech. After it's done, uproar, people are moving around. He just walks up to MLK as he's folding it and putting it in his pocket. And he's like, "Hey, can I have that?" And Martin Luther King Jr. just gives it to him.
Oh my God.
So then he's kept this for years and years and years and didn't tell anybody. Just had it in his closet, folded up in a book. Like don't keep it folded because then it's going to fall apart. It wasn't until this interview when he was like, "Oh yeah, I have it." He said, I mean, now it's framed or whatever, but the interesting thing is he's never sold it to anybody. He's not willing to sell it. He's like, it belongs to the people. I'm going to leave it in my family. I'm going to leave it with people that will appreciate it and keep it the way, it was just going to be in his pocket anyways. So somebody even offered it to him for $3.5 million.
Yeah, no, just either keep it or make sure it gets in the Smithsonian or something. Like that's it. Like either like keep it or
safer.
Please put it on display like in Washington.
Yeah,
forever and always, untouched by the family or anybody.
But just weird also that nobody wondered where the paper was. Maybe they just assumed it got thrown away.
How incredible to like if you lived during this time and then like 1980 whatever comes around and you just now have the thought of like, oh yeah, I guess it was written down.
Right.
What happened? No one's asked that question in how many years?
Yeah. But interestingly,
makes you all feel stupid for a second. Oh, we didn't even ask.
All this stuff that involves him saying, "I have a dream," and his thoughts on that is not on the paper. That was all improvised.
Ah, how incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God. That's insane.
Yeah.
Wow. So even the piece, the piece of it isn't even. It's a magic trick.
Yeah.
This is incredible. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. After the civil rights where he gives the speech, there is the KKK bombing in the Birmingham church, which is the 4 girls.
Yeah.
And galvanizes, oh yeah, people, this is like
the unrest
coming into. Yeah. Yeah.
There needs to be federal action.
Yeah. Kennedy is assassinated. LBJ becomes president. This is when the Civil Rights Bill and then Act
Charles
is
Manson's
passed.
on drugs.
Yeah.
Shelby's building race cars. 1964 is insane.
It's a crazy time. Also, then he wins the Nobel Peace Prize after this. At this point, he wants the voting rights bill from LBJ. And now we're going into Selma, where he says, not yet. I just can't imagine, like, all of that is leading up to this. And it's about now, because see, they got the civil rights, so he's not, but we're still not there.
That is the shortcoming of Selma, the film, is you don't kind of really understand exactly where this sits in his, like the opening scene is him winning the Nobel Peace Prize. So you already there is, we're past I Have a Dream. We're in a different part here. Where are we? And so you don't quite bring all that baggage all the way there.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to have it all symbolized in the bombing of the church girls and the attempts on the bridge. Actually, how many attempts it took to get this, and the little minutia events that led up to that.
Yeah.
That moment right there in that little town. So that's the one thing you don't quite get with Selma is exactly everything it took to get to that moment. You get an idea of it, and they try to clue you in the best they can.
And like I said, there's tons of other marches and riots and people dying unnecessarily in the street and injustices and boycotts and sit-ins, and like all of that is also happening within this time frame. In Selma, since we teased it, Malcolm X actually came to visit in Selma, though Martin Luther King was not there because he was on the march. So he met with Coretta Scott King and talked about Martin Luther King Jr. and
this is in the film, and this feels like such a contrived fake scene, but apparently it's like 100% real.
It happened.
It's incredible.
And it's crazy because at this point, Malcolm X is being more persuaded toward the peaceful protest, nonviolent resistance.
He says he's been enlightened to another way of thinking. He's been shown the way, you know, and it only beckoned to me now. It's like, well, now I want to research, you know, Malcolm X, and I don't know enough about him, and I don't know enough about. They do a great job of like showing that dynamic between the two of them would have been like at that time, but it doesn't. Again, with all of everything it took to get to "I Have a Dream" and the Nobel Peace Prize, you don't get all of the baggage. And he's ahead of that message, saying basically, I don't want my movement to actually be the way this goes. I think you guys are right. I need to use my momentum in a way that is helpful for you.
Yeah, I am the yin and the yang.
Yes,
I am the counterpoint.
Exactly. This is what I have to give. Actually, you're right. I hear that this is how we can direct this energy into your movement. And so I'm only just like, what enlightened, you know, what actually drove Malcolm X to be able to make that kind of decision? I mean, that takes a lot. Yeah. Especially from somebody whose ideology is that, I mean, he's people call him okay radical. Malcolm X is a legit radical. So it only beckons to me like what really changed his mind. But
well, I mean, and unfortunately, we wish we could know more. He gets killed
in this
very
same
shortly
time
after. He was 39 years old. Immediately after this, in 1965, in Watts, in Los Angeles, there was a 6-day riot with police. Martin Luther King goes down. Stokely Carmichael is another radical voice that's coming up on the scene saying, this is taking way too long, Martin Luther King Jr. Like, we can't be doing these small movements and this peaceful whatever. It's like we need to fight back. At this point, King realizes his message is not just for the South. There's just as much going on in the North where people think that everything is fine and segregation has desegregation has solved everything. Right. So he moves to Chicago in 1966 and lives in these areas with these people. There's also a rally with 50,000 people that showed up against housing discrimination. Johnson sends a third bill to Congress for housing. It doesn't go through. There's more riots. There's more violence in the northern cities. In 67, he speaks out against the Vietnam War. He speaks out against poverty in general and was going to have this Poor People's Campaign, which was going to be people camping out on the mall in D.C., and that's supposed to begin in 68. He goes to speak in Memphis for workers' rights. Riot breaks out before he gets there, so he reschedules for a peaceful one. He's like, no, this isn't how we do business. And then that's when he gets shot at the motel in Memphis. And he is also 39 years old when this happens. It's so crazy because also immediately after this, there are riots in more than 100 cities. LBJ takes federal action and 50,000 troops are sent out via the president. LBJ does get the Fair Housing Act signed in 68. And then in 71, cities begin to honor his day. And in 83, Reagan signs it as a national holiday. The thing that I saw in an interview with Ava, the director of Selma, she was talking about how it's so crazy because as far as the Selma things are concerned, he wasn't there for the first one, violence and bloodshed, shows up to the second one. I mean, they're going to let him go through, but it's like it's going to be absolute hell or something. There's a trap for them over the bridge, or they don't have the proper permits. They don't have the proper permits or some such thing. And so he says, hold on, we're going to turn around and go back. And people go back. She's saying, I don't think it's like people were trusting one person. Like he was the voice and face of this. And nowadays, all of the movements and all of the rebellions and all of these things are so decentralized to say, oh yeah, there's one guy standing at the front of thousands of people who are going to march, and he just turns around and is like, no, we're not going to do this. And everybody's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
We're not, they didn't surge past him. They didn't question him. They just said, he's got us this far. He has the wherewithal and knows what's going on, and we're going to keep following him and not attack people and not, I mean, that is most of his legacy in being able to lead people.
To be the face of something. I mean, the film doesn't shy away from from saying, no, I cannot hide.
Yeah.
There's multiple attempts where security is trying to like, well, don't do the last leg of the, if you do in a car, this part of it, I feel like the power behind it is the solidarity of it. Exactly what you've just touched on.
Yeah.
And he knows the power of that. So if he leads these hundreds and hundreds of people right into a trap, what's tomorrow look like? He's beaten and broken on the news, or he's dead. If it's not a trap, they stood down. So why can't we stand down? I think that's kind of the thought there. They stood down, and I'm not unsure of the motives. Maybe we stand down, not letting the pressure get. I mean, I can't imagine the weight on that man's shoulders right there on that bridge. The police have cleared the way, and you have hundreds of people who are willing to lockstep with you, whatever move you make. You get on one knee, they get down on one. Is this right? Is taking one more step right? The sobriety, the wherewithal that is, I mean, it's...
Yeah. I think it's also
no words.
Culminated in his addressing of individual people as well, because he is the face of a giant movement where you could get caught up in the weeds of, oh, I have to save everybody's. Like, he was on a global mission, but he was also so intuitive to individuals and how they contributed to the larger scope of what he was trying to accomplish and what he believed in.
Yeah.
And so I'll post a link to an interview that I found, but there was this actress, well, she's still an actress, but Nichelle Nichols. This was in 1967. So for some context of what's going on, this is after Selma. This is after all this. She was the character Uhura in Star Trek, and she had just done one season that had come out in 67. She's an African-American lady who is one of the key characters and is on the bridge of the ship and has responsibility and control, and in later seasons was the first interracial kiss on television.
Wow.
She was thinking of changing her mind, and she was like, well, this isn't really what I need to do. I'm going to go back to musical theater. That's where she was before. She said she was at some sort of benefit in Beverly Hills. She thinks it was for the NAACP, and somebody comes up to her and is like, hey, your biggest fan wants to talk to you. And she was like, okay, whatever. She turns around and she's like, she sees, and she's like, well, whoever this fan is, they're going to have to wait because Martin Luther King is walking towards me.
Oh, my God.
And he's like, hey, it's me.
Oh, my God.
He said, Star Trek is the only show that we are going to let our kids stay up late to watch because it's past their bedtime. And he's like, God. I appreciate, like, you're doing so much good for everyone. Like, this is an incredible role, and keep doing it. Like, you're our inspiration. You're, in quotes of what she says, you are our image of where we're going. You're 300 years from now. Wow. Because it's like, this is a show set in the future. He's like, this is what we're looking for.
Yes.
And she says, she's like, I don't know how I got the courage, but she was like, well, this is going to be my last season. Like, I'm thinking of leaving. And he said, like, it was the most serious he ever got.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, don't you understand, for the first time, we're seen as we should be seen. You don't have a black role. You have an equal role.
Yes.
It's like this, like, if you go, they could replace you with a white dude or an alien or anything.
Yes.
Like, this is the most important thing for us. Like, it affects my family. It affects everybody.
Like,
please.
You do not understand the meaning you have in the world. Like
yeah.
And
that's how he was able to connect.
That's the beautiful. I mean, it's so beautiful. You really do not have an idea of the impact you really have. I mean, and with social media these days, the way that we're all connected throughout the world, it's absolutely insane to think that you live by yourself, you don't affect anyone, and nobody affects you.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Even the most unseen person in the world can probably have an effect on somebody on the other side of the country, on the other side of the world. It's absolutely, people discount themselves, and they're always the first to discount themselves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this this actress has no idea that she's waging that war alongside MLK.
Yeah.
She has no, she's just thinking, well, I don't know, I might get a different part on another thing, or
Yeah.
maybe I'm thinking not doing just the minutia of her own life. She has no idea how inspiring that is to the children of MLK, to MLK himself.
Yeah.
That's staggering. Dude, you're just an actress. But you're not just an actress.
Yeah, she started a foundation, and she was heavily involved in NASA afterwards, and she was involved in the recruitment of Sally Ride.
Look at that.
And, you know, thousands of women looked to her as it, like Whoopi Goldberg was like, yeah, she was my inspiration for getting into this.
Man.
And she said, yeah, that was when like the world
you
tilted
never know
on its
who's
side.
looking at you. You never know who you're inspiring or who you might be letting down, or, you know, like you really have no idea to the extent of which you are visible and impact the people in this world.
Yeah.
I mean, how incredible.
Yeah. And Martin Luther King Jr. was a Star Trek fan, so the pop culture
is abound. You never knew. We're bringing it to you every week. Taylor, where can they reach us?
At illiterate.pod on Instagram.
Please, God.
If you have any questions, comments, or curse words,
get that sticker. Get it.
Yeah, if you want a free sticker, give us a message. And thank you all for listening. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you, Taylor.
And we will see you all next week.